with Gershon Baskin, who joins us, Middle East Director of the International Communities Organization. He's a hostage negotiator himself for many, many years and knows all about these kind of things. So as someone who does know all about these kind of things, what do you make of these indications maybe that we're seeing some sort of a shift on the part of the Israelis, and maybe there's some sort of progress that, you know, I know we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but maybe we'll get something here in the not so distant future. What do you think?
Right, there's a possibility that the stars are aligning in the right way right now, and that has a lot to do with the United States wanting to make sure that Israel doesn't invade the city of Rafah in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. At the same time, we have Ramadan, the holy month of Ramadan, 2 weeks away from now, and both of these elements in the negotiations are pushing the parties to try and reach an agreement. An agreement would afford us a 45-day ceasefire. There would be an exchange of Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners. And perhaps during that 45 days, the international community, the United States, the Qataris, and the Egyptians could come up with some way of ending this war diplomatically without the catastrophic results of another Israeli attack on another Palestinian city in the Gaza Strip. It is important that we utilize every opportunity possible to bring the 134 hostages home. We know that probably a fifth of them, maybe a quarter of them, maybe even more, are no longer alive. Every day they're in Gaza is a risk to their lives. And the Israelis seem ready to make a deal to release Palestinian prisoners, including a number of prisoners who are serving life sentences for murdering Israelis. If the Hamas is willing to have those prisoners released outside of Israel and Palestine, perhaps to Qatar, there might be able to be a deal here.
That's the part that seems to be a pretty big shift from Israel's point of view. Here's what Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, said about it over the weekend when he was asked on CBS. Watch.
Hamas started out with just crazy demands, and you know, it's too soon to say if they've abandoned them. But if they do abandon them and get into what you call the ballpark, they're not even in the city. They're in another planet. But if they come down to a reasonable situation, then yes, we'll have a hostage. I hope so.
He hopes so. Gershon, to the point you were making before we played that clip, the idea that maybe Netanyahu and his government would be open to releasing, you know, some of these most hardcore of prisoners, people with, you know, terrorism convictions and the like, that was never on the table before, but it might be now, right?
Right. Well, I think it's been on the table from the beginning. The Israelis have simply not wanted to deal with it because it's something that's very difficult to deal with. But Hamas made this demand from the very outset. Another sticking point and something that has to be negotiated is that the Hamas wants Israel to declare the end of the war and to withdraw from the Gaza Strip. I think that the most they can get at this point is an Israeli redeployment outside of the Palestinian cities in the Gaza Strip. If there will be a 45-day ceasefire, the Israeli army will have to redeploy in order to protect itself. And that will also meet Hamas's need. They're going to demand no flyovers, and Israel will have a difficult time agreeing to that. But it was done during the first ceasefire when the first group of hostages were released. So there are possibilities here. We should be hopeful. We should continue to push on the United States, on the Qataris, and on the Egyptians to push hard on Hamas, but on Israel as well. We need this deal.
But 45 days after, if there is the pause, this, as Robert was saying, the Israelis are still saying the ground operations in Rafah, that's still going to happen, right? You still expect that to happen no matter what? Or?
Not necessarily. This war will not end if Hamas is continuing to govern Gaza and threaten Israel. But the Palestinian Authority government in Ramallah has submitted its resignation. Yes. President Abbas is in the midst of forming a new government, which should be representative and legitimate in the eyes of the Palestinian people. And then perhaps there might be a negotiation to diplomatically end the war, with Hamas leadership exiting the Gaza Strip by agreement with their own Palestinian leaders.
Was that significant, the resignation of the Palestinian Authority? Prime Minister?
It's very significant if a government which has legitimacy in the eyes of the Palestinians is selected by President Abbas. President Abbas will eventually need to step aside as well because he does not enjoy legitimacy from his own people. And eventually the Palestinians will have to go to elections. But we need a temporary administrative Palestinian government that can take over the West Bank and Gaza and then appeal to the international community to support the aid for the reconstruction of Gaza and bringing in an Arab-led a peacekeeping force to the Gaza Strip that would be acceptable to Israel.
All right, we'll hope for the best, of course, in the coming days, especially for all these hostage families. Gershon Baskin, thank you, sir. We appreciate your time, as always.